Professor Zhao and others have talked about how we need to be responsible, and I agree, and we often tell our journalists that, but don't bet your bottom dollar that it's going to happen. First of all, there's a dispute on the meaning of the word, what is responsible. Second, we live in the information age, we live in the internet age. We're not only dealing with professional journalists, you're dealing with citizens, citizen journalism as well. People are going to give their views, and what the dice are going to fall as they may. And I think we have to be ready for that. But that said, I think on media, what's important in the China-India context, I think, is how the governments and the business community use the media in each other's countries. And I think that is something that really hasn't happened. The Indian business and Indian government has not figured out how to use the Chinese media, as far as I can see. And the Chinese government and Chinese business has not figured out how to use the Indian media. Part of the problem, of course, is language. The common language between China and India is English. And the English media is a minority in both countries. That is the problem, but I don't think that's the only problem. I think media exposure, to a large extent, is a function of the degree of overall engagement between two countries on many fronts. It's not just an economic story. I think, as Professor Ricky mentioned, it's not just business. And the problem, one of the big problems with India and China is the lack of engagement on multiple fronts other than trade. Even on trade, let's remember that a lot of the trade, the composition of trade, is raw materials, capital goods, and commoditized manufacturers, and not brands. It is brands that create understanding, curiosity, and admiration in a way that iron ore or cotton yarn or factory machinery can never do. So I think that is something that still has to happen. But another reflection of the lack of engagement is what you see on the investment side. The cumulative investment, Chinese investment into India as of the end of last year is $575 billion US, which is really paltry. And the cumulative Indian investment into China is less than $450 million US, which in the scheme of things is pathetic. It's very, very small. You see it in the lack of dearth of cultural connection. Yes, there is a revival of Buddhism in China, but the Indian connection there is known but not widely appreciated. Buddhism is also not as prominent in India today as it used to be. There are some Indian cultural events in China occasionally, and Chinese events in India, but by and large the cultural footprint in either country of the other one is very small. You see it in the lack of people-to-people contact. I think Professor Zhang mentioned the importance of people-to-people contact. Chinese families and Indian families do not have family members working, living, or studying in the other country the way they do in Europe or the United States or Australia or even Singapore. I think this is a factor. And even among academics, I really wonder what the depth of contacts are. I suspect it doesn't go very far beyond specialized institutions, and it's a very fledgling process. You see it in tourism as well. India draws less than 100,000 Chinese tourists a year. Singapore manages to draw 15 times that amount, 1.5 million last year. China manages to do much better on tourism. It draws in 500,000 Indians a year, but Singapore, again, a city, is able to more than double that. For Indian visitors to Singapore, it's about double what they are to China. Of course, all these things are starting from a low base, and I think Simon had mentioned there are problems with flights. You don't get not many direct flights. In fact, Air India cancelled its Bombay-Shanghai flight because they just did not take us. Okay, that's the origins of the lack of engagement, the lack of the big gap that we're talking about. Those are some of the factors there. Let me look at the bright side. Even though I'm a media person, I must confess, I have less faith in the media than I have in popular culture. And I think I have less faith in politicians, I have less faith in even business than I have in popular culture. And it's very encouraging here that in the Chinese government's official film production company has given us backing to produce a full-length Bollywood movie. It's called Goldstruck, and it's about a Chinese and Indian student in America who meet up and then they go on to have an adventure in both their countries. And it's going to be a huge Bollywood production, directed by the Hong Kong director Tony Leung, and it's going to be probably released, I think, either toward the end of this year or next year. I think these things are important. The producers of the movie, the Chinese producers of the movie, want to make this the biggest hit since Raj Kapoor. Raj Kapoor, by the way, for those who may not know, who may not know him, was a big movie star in the 1960s and 70s in India, and he was a huge movie star, hero in China. At that time, also Russia. At that time, Indian films were allowed in China because Western films were sort of bourgeois and sort of, too liberal or whatever. Anyway, he went on to be a huge star. So the movies like Caravan, Shri 420, and Awara, which were Miralam Joker, which were huge hits in China. And the older Chinese people, I don't know if there's any of you among them, but they remember him vividly and even sing his songs even today. So anyway, they want to bring about a revival of this, and I think I see more hope in things like this. Interestingly, the yoga guru, the Indian yoga guru, Mr. P.K.S. Iyengar, he wrote these famous books on yoga, Light on Yoga, was this classic. He wrote many others. In China held his first ever yoga summit last year. And he was there as a key speaker. He was astonished to find, without him knowing it, all his books have been translated into Chinese illegally. And he had already 30,000 followers in China. He went on to suggest that he thinks China will overtake India in yoga as well. He probably hasn't heard of Swami Ramdev. I'm not sure he's on the ball there, but never mind. Finally, I know I'm running out short of time, but I do just want to focus a little bit on business, if I might. I think China, like everybody else, really wants to do business in India. But the problem is they find it a hassle, they find it, it's too difficult, and they're just looking for a way to do it. It's very significant to me that they invited Narendra Modi, the Chief Minister of Gujarat, who is economically a very dynamic administrator. They invited him to China. He enthusiastically accepted. He gave them a talk on the Chinese the links between China and Gujarat, going back to the Buddhist times. He promised to build the biggest Buddhist stupa in the world in Gujarat. He went on his trip in December. It was a huge success. He went with 20 businessmen. He came back with a armful of contracts, which he's busy implementing. So I think it's trying to happen. I mean, India is trying to attract China into its road sector. It's going to spend 70 billion or whatever the next 5 years. Most of it is going to come from the private sector. I think China's involvement in infrastructure is going to ramp up. It has spare capacity in this area. Chinese spending is winding down in this area. India is going up. It has the expertise, it has the spare capacity, and India is one of the places they should be looking at. There are 100 companies, Chinese companies in India, companies like Huawei. Huawei employs 6,000 people in India, and it quotes Mahatma Gandhi on his website. You have a look at it. And Indian companies are also expanding rapidly. So these things are happening, and I think as these things happen, particularly popular culture, as it spreads, as people-to-people contacts improve, the gap will narrow. So I should stop there. I want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikram. I'm going to open to the House, but before